made for this podcast and YouTube series. I'm so excited to finally share episode 1 with you guys. Today's topic is ministry misconceptions. Now, before we get into the different ministry misconceptions, let's kind of tackle a couple of definitions. First is, what is the definition of ministry? The definition of ministry is a period of service. And the etymology or the origin of the word ministry is activity of a servant, duty, task, support within the church. So basically what ministry means is a time of service that we have within the church. Now, what's the definition of misconception? Misconception is a wrong or an inaccurate idea. So basically, ministry misconceptions is a wrong idea that we have around ministry, or the wrong idea that we have around the service that we have within the church. Now, there are 5 different ministries within the church. We have pastors, we have prophets, we have evangelists, we have teachers, and then we have apostles. We also have different motivational spiritual gifts, and we have different talents. Now, the combination of this makes you the perfect servant for the church, because there's nothing, the Bible tells us that we're all a part of the body of Christ, and that we all serve in a function within the church. And so the thing that I guess the reason why I wanted to bring this is because there's this wrong idea that, not all of us are called to ministry. And so I kind of wanted to clear those wrong ideas, because each and every single one of us has at least one ministry. Each one of us has one or more spiritual gifts. And each one of us has our talents. We have one or more talents. And we also bring our personal experience. And all of that combination is like, when like the mad scientist puts in his creation, it's like do, and at the end there's like there's this creation. And that's kind of how I picture it. It's like God put this perfect combination of things within you so that you can edify the church, so that you can serve the church with your ministry, with your spiritual gifts, with your talents, and with your past history. God uses all of that so that you can work within the church. And that is basically that we could just jump into the very first misconception, is that we're all called the same way. We're not called the same way. The way my husband was called into ministry is definitely not the way I was called. I was called into ministry like weeks. I had just accepted the Lord when I was 18 years old, and God's like, you're gonna be a pastor. I think it was like 2 months. And I didn't even understand what that even meant, because I was a newbie Christian. I didn't know anything, and my husband had his calling from when he was like a little kid. And so you can see that just within my experience with me and my husband, we have totally different callings, and that we're all called differently. Now, if we look throughout the Bible, we don't see a pattern of how God calls people into service, into serve him and to serve his people. We see some people that jumped straight into the ministry, and then we see people that took some time. If we look at Paul converted and then started ministering right away. But if we look at the disciples, they had 3.5 years of training with Jesus before they entered into their calling. And so the misconception, the wrong idea is that, God is going to use like an evangelist or a prophet to be like, this is going to be your ministry. Sometimes God doesn't work that way. Sometimes we fall into our ministry. Sometimes we figure it out as we go. And the reality is, I never thought that I was a very organized person. I never thought like, oh, I have the gift of administration. I like things tidy, but I didn't know that right away, that was part of my spiritual gifting. And so it wasn't until I started trying different areas within my church that I realized I'm actually really gifted in this area, and this is how I can serve within the church. And I started off as secretary, and I ended up loving being secretary of the church because I loved organization, and so sometimes we think, that we're all called the same way. Some of us, God is going to tell us straight up from the very beginning what we're called towards, and we're going to work towards that. But some of us, we kind of have to figure it out along the way. Now, the second misconception is that ministry is about you. I see a lot of people that have a ministry, and it doesn't seem like their ministry is about Jesus. It seems more like their ministry is about themselves. And that is like the furthest from the truth. That is a complete wrong idea. Jesus himself said, I did not come here to be served, but to serve. And I think that that's a big problem that we're seeing today, is that people think like, oh, this ministry is all about me, and the reality, it's like, if God didn't even give you that gifting, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in. And ministry isn't about us. Ministry is about serving. It's not about people serving us. It's about us serving others. That's what ministry, the definition of ministry is serving others, using what we have to be able to serve other people. Another misconception that we have is that ministry is only done on the altar. Ministry is not like it. I feel like nowadays, like, people consider having a ministry just being whether you're a pastor or a preacher. And the reality is, you can have a ministry, because ministry in its definition is just serving. So if you're serving within the church, you have a ministry that you're working in, and you're serving within that ministry. And the misconception is that if you're not on the altar, then you don't have a ministry. And if you're like a teacher of the kids, that you don't have a ministry, that's completely wrong, because one of the ministries is being a teacher. And if you're using that gift to be able to serve the kids, serve with teaching the children, then you're executing, or you're using your gift, to serve within your church, and you're working in ministry. You could be the parking attendant, and that could be your ministry, because you could be an evangelist, evangelizing to everyone, while parking everyone's cars. And I think that the misconception is that you have to have your name on a flyer, or you need to have your picture everywhere for you to be considered a minister, and that's the farthest from the truth. Because ministry is what you do to serve within your church and to serve your community. Now, another misconception is that there are levels to ministry. And like, if one ministry is higher than the other, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I used to feel the same way. Like, I used to feel like, oh, I'm the teacher of the youth ministry, so if I become a teacher of the women's ministry, that I'm getting like to a higher level. And it's like we're putting down all the different ministries. God said in his word that the ear wasn't more important than the hand, or that there was no body part that was less important. If not, they were just all necessary for the body to be able to function. And sometimes we put levels to ministry, like being a pastor is at the peak of level of ministry, versus maybe someone working on like the worship team. And the reality is that not there is not one ministry more important than the other. If not, they're just all necessary, and they all have different functions. The pastor has a different function within the church, just as an evangelist or a teacher or a prophet or a preacher. You know, like, all of them are necessary within the church, and not one is greater than the other. And sometimes, you know, we think like, oh, if I'm the pastor of the children's ministry, that, you know, like, in order for me to make it, I need to be like the leader. I need to be one of the, you know, head pastors of the church. And the reality is that that's the furthest from the truth. If you are working within your church, you are just as important as the main leaders and the elders of the church, because everyone serves as a function within the church. Now, another misconception that we have is that there's no space for me. You know, before starting Mending Heart Ministries, I was like, wow, God, there's so many women's ministries out there. Like, man, I could Google women's ministry and a whole bunch of them will pop up. Why do you want me to start, you know, women's ministry? And the reality is, or the reality is that there's so much work to do in the kingdom that thinking that there's no space for you is a really, really bad, a wrong idea that we have, that there's no space for me. Oh, there's already kids teachers, there's already women's leaders, there's already youth leaders, there's already pastors, there's already prophets. God, why would you want to use me? And the reality is that God, from the very beginning, if you're breathing now, is because God has called you for this time. If you're alive and breathing and well, God has called you for this time. You know, you can't sit there and think, oh, there isn't a place for me within the church. That is a lie that either comes from our insecurity, or a lie that comes from the enemy himself, that makes us think that there's no space for me in the kingdom. That's a 100% wrong idea, because there is a space for you. There is a function for you. And if you don't know it, then you need to sit down and have a conversation with your pastor, with your leadership, and ask them, you know, help me, guide me to the ministry, because I want to be a part of the body. I want to function within the body. I want to serve within the body. There is such a blessing within serving within your church and serving your community and serving those around you. There's such a blessing. Sometimes we're just so just into ourselves and into our lives, that we're just into like our little life bubble, that we think that that's all there is. And the reality is that there's more. God has more for you. God has a ministry for you. God has a place for you within the kingdom. All you have to do is pray to God and start now. You don't have to go to school of ministry. You don't have to go to theological institute. No, to have ministry, all you have to do is have a willing heart, willingness, and then God will direct you in the path that He wants for you. You know, I didn't know exactly how I was gonna get to being pastor, you know, and I still was serving in different ministries within the church before I got to this one. And the thing is that sometimes we think like, oh, this is the end all be all, but I've been happy to serve within the church from the very beginning, and even now. Just now my function is different. And so to think that there's no space for you is a lie. You know, don't allow your insecurity, don't allow people's negativity, don't allow Satan to tell you that there is no space for you, because there is. You have a specific role within the kingdom, and it will bring you some heartache, maybe some tears, but it'll be the biggest blessing that you will experience within your life. Another misconception that there is that ministry isn't for everyone. Now, this this couldn't be the furthest from the truth. Ministry is for everyone, and this is kind of where it becomes more specific, or I want to talk about it more in a specific way towards women, because depending on the church or depending on the belief, there's going to believe that ministry isn't for women, that women are just supposed to sit in a corner and not, do anything. And it is my personal interpretation and belief that men and women have a calling towards ministry, and that it is for everyone. And let me tell you that it saddens me, because there was a time in one of my jobs that I told people that I would preach and that I would teach, and I was serving within my church, and I literally had people put CDs on my desk, send me Bible studies, and I don't even know what. There was just so much opposition, even within a certain, I was leading within a certain organization, and I had a lot of opposition because they didn't believe that women were called to ministry. And I know everyone has their own interpretation of the Bible, and everyone has their own belief, but from my interpretation of scriptures, the ministry is for everyone. Man, women, youth, kids. There is ministry for everybody. There is no exclusion, just because of your sex, like just men could be ministers and women can't. And that is, to me, one of the biggest misconceptions that there are, is that only men could be in ministry. And I am so thankful for all the women that showed me an example and their boldness, because to show me that there is a place for women within the church, that there is a place for women within the kingdom, and that we have something to offer, the kingdom of God. There are no exceptions in God's eyes. In God's eyes, it's everyone working together for the kingdom of God. Now, the very last misconception is that when you're in ministry, everyone is for you. Let me tell you, the more time that you are in ministry and the more known, because I don't want to say that there are levels to ministry, once you made it, or whatever that means, just the more known you are for doing your ministry, there comes a level of scrutiny, criticism, backlash, pushback, and people think, like, if I only make it to be an evangelist, man, things are gonna just be better, and everyone's gonna love me, and everything's gonna be okay. And the reality is, that could be the furthest from the truth. The more time and the more known you are for your ministry, the more pushback, the more criticism, the more people talk about you. Just because the more exposed you are, you're giving, not everyone's gonna agree with how you minister, how you look, how you talk, how you act. And the misconception is like, oh, I'm going to have more friends, I'm going to be more known. And the reality is that in ministry, sometimes it could be incredibly lonely, because you can be surrounded by a bunch of people and still be alone. And you need to learn who are really there for you and who is just there for, like, the fish and the bread. Just like Jesus, Jesus was surrounded by multitudes of people, but some people were just there for what he could offer, and there were some there that really had their back. And so, just because there's a big multitude around doesn't mean that all those people are there for you and want the best for you. So these are my 7 different misconceptions that we have in ministry. I love you guys. If you guys are on podcasts, please rate it. Leave us some good feedback so that we can continue getting this content out there. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like, hit the subscribe button, and then leave me a comment and let me know, what ministry are you currently working in? Where are you working within the kingdom? And if you have questions about where should I start, please, I have all of my information. We have all of our information on all our social media platforms. Reach out to us. My husband has an amazing class on spiritual gifts, ministries, temperaments, and how you can kind of start getting to know where your place is within the ministry. So if you're interested in that, please leave a comment below. Please reach out to me so I can get that to you. I love you guys. God bless you. Until next time. Bye.